All right, we're going to move into the PowerPoint portion of this training that takes us through the different items that will explain the election process a little better. If you've been through this before, you're going to notice this is a very concise version of it so that we can move through it quickly. I want to talk about before the polls open, what you'll be doing as election judges as you prepare to get everything ready and up and going. So one thing is you need to set up your voting area. So you have to arrange the voting booths, the voting machines, and lay out all your supplies. You're going to have the plexiglass shields this year, and you're going to have all the additional things like the ink pens and the markers and the stylus to lay out. And so you want to arrange the polling place so it's got a good flow. You want the booths and the voting machines to be 6 foot apart. And don't forget to put your little tape marks down so the voters know where to stand. That's going to control the number of people inside of your polling place because most of these polling places aren't that large, and there's only going to be about 3, 4, or 5 people in there at a time, and the rest will have to wait outside till they can get in. What time do you need to be there? You need to be there at 5 a.m. So you need to be there an hour prior to the opening of the polls, and this election is going to take you every bit of that time to get ready. If you always work with the same crew there at the polling place and you notice that Betty's not there that day, give us a call. Maybe we can start calling Betty, try to wake her up or whatever's going on. Or if we know there's an issue, we'll start trying to move people around that morning so that we balance out the polling places and everybody has as many judges as we can. Stay organized during the day. What I mean by stay organized is in this election, slow down a little bit. What I mean by that is that one of the things I've seen as we've done months and months of voting this year and 40 days of early voting is the fact that it's easy to get unorganized because of the pressures of the election and what's going on with COVID. So I want you to slow down. That'll keep mistakes from happening, and just make sure that each process is done fully. If you're doing an affidavit or a provisional envelope, do it completely before you move to the next process, those kind of things. You are officers of the Circuit Court, so you uphold the U.S. and the Illinois Constitution. You're sworn by the Circuit Court, and you are the sole authority in the polling place, campaign-free zone, and you're over the poll watchers and the proper conduct of the elections. Remember, rotate positions. It reduces fraud. It's the law. And this year, if you don't rotate with the application judge and the judges working the voting machines, they're going to get really wore out. You do act as a board. If you have to make a decision, you vote. So if there's 5 of you there as election judges in that precinct, you vote, and 3, whatever they decide, is what you're going to do. The majority wins. There is no head judge. It's equal authority. In other words, each of you have equal authority by your vote. Now, that doesn't mean that one judge doesn't know the voting machines better, one judge doesn't know the paperwork better, one judge might know another process better. What you need to be doing when you have those free times is you're sharing that information with each other and making each other stronger and better judges. I want to make sure that you're giving the correct ballot. We're lucky this year, most of the precincts across the county only have one ballot style. And so you're not going to have another ballot style to confuse. But in Centralia, there are 2 ballot styles in some of the precincts. The city of Centralia ran a referendum for a sales tax increase on the ballot. And so if you're in the city limits, you're voting on that question. If you're outside the city limits, you don't have that on your ballot. So there are precincts that have both voters in it, and so we need to be real careful about which ballot we're giving out. Our ballots are designated by number, and I've got images here later that I'll show you, so you compare the number on the application to the number on the ballot. That's how you know. F-15 ballots. I don't know if you can see this on the video, but it'll say F-15 right above the precinct name. F-15 are federal-only ballots. What that means is it's going to have President, Vice President, U.S. Congress, U.S. Representative on it. If you give one of those out, the voter's going to be unhappy with you. You don't ever use the F-15, even though by law I have to include those in your kits. I have to include them on the encoder for the touchscreen, and we have to have those paper ballots in the polling place. They would be for someone who just shows up on election day and says, I'm not registered, but I want to vote federally only. Nowadays, you wouldn't do that. So don't ever use an F-15. You're either going to send them to a grace period site at the Salem courthouse, or are you going to send them to the township building office on 148 South Poplar in Centralia, and we're going to get their registration fixed, and we're going to vote them right there. And so they're not going to have to just vote for federal offices only. So do not use those. Those will be marked not to use, but be careful with them. You want to compare each ballot style to the specimen ballot. So you want to look at your paper ballots when you get them. You want to look at your sample that's in there, your specimen ballot. It's usually on a yellow piece of paper, and it'll show the actual ballots the different ballots that you're going to have. You want to check the office to vote for in each candidate. You want to compare that also to your voting machine zero tapes when you run them in the morning. When you go to sign off on your certificate of inspection for your ballots, you want to make sure that if you've opened packages of ballots that you count those. And so on that certificate, it basically tells you how many ballots were sent to you. So say there was 75, and you count them and realize there's only 73 in there. It's whatever count that you come up with that morning. That shrink wrapping machine is not perfect. It's a +2 minus 2 when it counts. And so if you find 73, you change it to 73 and you guys sign off on that sheet. Valid write-in candidates. This is a form of what the write-in candidate form would look like, and it would have the candidate's name, address, and the office they're running for. We do have write-ins this year. They are for president, vice president, and one for U.S. Congress. Don't forget to put the rest of your signage up. You've got your polling place sign, your ADA compliant sign, your street sign that points as an arrow to the polling place. Don't forget all that stuff too. Who can be in the polling place? Law enforcement, qualified poll watchers, representatives of Attorney General, State's Attorney, Election Authority, and the State Board of Elections. Law enforcement's there, you've probably called them yourself. Poll watchers we'll talk about later. The Attorney Generals will definitely be around to check your polling places. They're there to help you. They're your friends. Answer their questions. If they point something out, make the correction and go and do what they say. If you see the State's Attorney, you'll probably see me. We've got a problem. Election Authority, they'll all be wearing lanyards with little ID badges on them. And the State Board of Elections generally does not come down here, but they would have lanyards also. Who can be a poll watcher? They have to be a registered voter, but not just from Marion County. It can be anywhere in Illinois. They must have credentials that they're going to surrender to you. They're appointed by a candidate, a political party, a civic organization, or somebody for or against a proposition. They need credentials for each precinct that they come into, not polling place. So if you have 2 precincts in a polling place, they need both the credentials to come in there. Candidates can be poll watchers, and they'll have a separate credential for that. Here's an example, I don't know if you can see it on the video, of the state's credentials. So the state has their logo at the top. Mine would look very similar, just lacking the logo. And so they're going to bring those to you when they first come in. They're going to surrender them. You're going to place those in an envelope for poll watcher credentials. On the outside of it, there's a sign in, sign out. So say they come in at 8 in the morning, you sign them in, take their credentials, and they leave at noon, you sign them out. They come back at 1 o'clock, you sign them back in, and they leave at 4, you sign them back out. You want to keep track of their time in the polling place. What rights do they have? They can observe, they can examine things, but they cannot touch anything. They can't do anything to bother the conduct of the election. They can't campaign, they can't electioneer, they can't talk with the voters about their opinions on things. They should stay 6 feet away from people, and they can come and go throughout the day. Campaign free zone. It's the 100 horizontal foot from the door of the polling place. That's that area where you're going to walk out and step off 100 feet, and you're going to place your little American flags, either on something or just stick them in the yard. And that's where there's no campaign signage, no buttons, no shirts, no hats, no electioneering, nobody working for or against a proposition or a candidate. It's 6 a.m. It's time to open the doors. You do want to go out this year and remind people to come on in, because people are staying in their cars with COVID as they go to doctor's offices and places like that, and so they might be doing that on election day. You need to contact us if you're short on judges. We'll see if we can move some people around. Lists to provide for early vote by mail and grace period voters. Normally what we would do is we would bring you a list that morning, and you would be responsible for removing them from the application pile. What we're going to do this year is my staff is going to pull out the applications of everyone who has voted and have them in a little plastic Ziploc bag with that list in your precinct kit. You will be responsible for the Monday voters only. So the kits are already out before we vote on Monday. My staff will be bringing those lists around with you between 5 and 6, and you'll want to go quickly and remove those from your application pile so that you don't accidentally vote someone who has already voted. You do want to keep those. I would put those in that same Ziploc bag and keep them handy. You may need them throughout the day. Everybody think they know now that Illinois is a no voter ID state. You cannot ask for voter ID in regular voting. There are 3 areas when you can ask for ID. And the first one is when someone registered to vote and they applied and they registered with just a postcard or through the mail. And they did not show photo ID and they are a brand new registered voter. There'll be a little envelope between where my name is and the ballot style on the application. And so if you see that little envelope, that means that that person's never showed ID. You can ask for ID during that scenario. You probably won't see any of those. Most of the voter registration is done online through a state portal now, and it's all pre-approved. And a lot of the mail that we get is people who are already registered. They're just updating their addresses or updating their names. Probably won't see that. One you don't have to deal with is grace period voters. When you send people to the courthouse, to the Centralia Township building on election day to get registered and vote, that's called grace period, and we'll take care of that, and we do have to see photo ID for that. The last one is something you might have to deal with. A voter being challenged in the polling place. And the poll watcher or another voter or yourself is challenging because of they're not claiming who they really are. In other words, they're using a fake name or they're faking out their address. You can ask for photo ID. You might have that one, but you'll be in a challenge situation when you do ask for that. Otherwise, no photo ID. What qualifies as ID? Obviously, driver's license, state ID card, utility bill, student ID, anything mailed to your residency, government check, paycheck, a lease or contract on a home, bank statement, or other government documents. It needs to show you the name and correct address of the voter. Vote by mail. It's a little different this year, and you got 3 things that are going to happen here that you've never had to deal with before. And so the first one is a voter was issued a vote by mail ballot. They did not vote it. They have it in their hand when they walk into the polling place on election day, and they're wanting to surrender it to you so that they can cast a ballot on election day. You're going to say, yes, I'll help you with that. You're going to get out a spoiled ballot envelope, and I'll show you an image later of that. You're going to have them place their ballot that they got in the mail in the spoiled ballot envelope, and then you're going to process that voter like a normal voter. Now keep in mind, you're going to have to go find their application because it's been pulled out of the applications because they already said they voted. It's going to be in the plastic bag with the already voted list. You'll need to retrieve it, and then you're going to process them just like a regular voter. They'll sign it, and you'll give them one of your ballots and vote them in the polling place. Number 2 that you'll have to deal with is the voter shows up at the polling place and they say to you, I never received my vote by mail ballot that I requested. Or I received it, voted it, and mailed it back, and the election authority did not receive it back. In other words, they called our office, we never got their ballot. They can sign an affidavit. It's going to be the salmon colored one. It's going to be item number 6 on there, and then they'll be able to sign that, and you can just go ahead and vote them like normal. Now you're going to have to go to the plastic bag, get out their application. Don't forget that. The affidavit is spindled with that application. Affidavits are a sworn document, so don't feel like you're taking a chance of somebody lying about voting. If they would try to cast a ballot still, we've got a document we can prosecute them on. The last item is a voter receives a vote by mail ballot, but they don't have it with them when they show up on the polling place on election day. And what I would tell them to do is go get it. If they cannot do that, then what you can do is you can vote them provisionally. I got a whole series on provisional ballots coming up. So those are 3 scenarios that you've never had before, but you're going to have voters asking you to do these things. And so the first one, surrender, you vote them normal. They don't have the ballot with them because Either it didn't come to them or it didn't come back to us, it's in the mail, affidavit, or they have their ballot, it's at home and they cannot go get it, provisional. Voters may be challenged by poll watchers, election judges, or another voter. Pretty well anybody in the polling place can challenge. Voter assistance. You may have to give voter assistance, or another voter may provide voter assistance, like a husband and wife might help each other. You want to get an affidavit completed on each person that was assisted. Assistance be done by a friend, a relative, or as 2 election judges, one from each party. Who cannot assist is the employer or a union for that person. Make sure you get the affidavit filled out and spindled. Masks for the voters. What the law says is that all voters must be allowed to exercise their right to vote regardless of face covering or distancing compliance. You cannot keep them from voting because they come in the polling place without a mask. You have to allow them to vote. Now, let's say they just forgot their mask in their car or they don't have it with them. I would offer them one of yours out of your kit and ask them if they'd like to have one. Right away you're going to know if it's just somebody that forgot it or somebody that is bound and determined they're not going to wear a mask. You're still going to have to vote them. I'm going to have this slide in your kits on election day so you can get a look at it a little closer. What I want you to do is take a deep breath, lean back, speak calmly to them because they're probably getting upset, and try not to engage them or force them into wearing a mask. You don't want to do that. You don't want to force them into social distancing if they're uncomfortable. What you want to do is to try to keep the situation calm, try not to let it escalate. And you might say something like this: we regret that you're unwilling to follow the guidelines, but we respect your right to vote. Please give us a bit of time to organize the area to provide additional physical distancing between you and the election judges, poll watchers, and other voters or anybody else in the polling place. And so what you're really going to do is you're going to slow the process up a little bit. When you're working their application and everything, what you want to do is get the people that are in the polling place in front of them to move on out, finish their voting, so that this person can go and vote and then move through, and then you can help the next voter in line. Let's say they are very aggravated about the mask and it becomes threatening or intimidating against you, or they're physically damaging items in the polling place, like knocking off the plexiglass shields or doing something that's violent. Call the law enforcement, call local law enforcement, Centralia Police, Salem Police, the county, get them there, let them deal with that voter. Now, that doesn't mean you might not have to vote that person later after they've calmed down, but you do not have to deal with violence or personal threats against you. Get the law enforcement there to take care of that. But hopefully they'll calm down, they'll vote and move on out of the polling place so you can go on with the rest of the voters. But you cannot refuse them the right to vote because they're not wearing a face mask. Here's your different stations. So this is the application judge station. And so here's where you would get the name and address of the voter. This is where you're going to find the application, pass it through to them, let them sign it with the ink pen that they're going to use one time, and they're going to hand that back to you. You also help them if they have questions about voting. You have a demonstrator ballot that you can use with them. You do want to announce their name. And one thing you might ask is if they're going to vote by touchscreen or vote paper ballot today. Some of them already like the touchscreen, may want to go that route. Some don't, want to vote paper. But when you say, well, this is John Smith, and he's going to vote touchscreen today, when you hand it down to the verification judge, that announces their name and also helps that judge prepare. Verification judge station. This is where you're going to compare the signature. And on our applications, the signature is right below where they signed. So you're going to be able to look right there and determine that. You're looking for the correct ballot style. You're going to initial the application in the lower left-hand corner. And that can be in black ink. Ballot distribution judge. They're going to be the judge that initials the ballot. Don't forget to do that. That's red ink in the initial in the top right-hand corner. And so you want to initial each and every ballot. That's another reason to rotate throughout the day. You're going to look for that ballot style number. You're going to spindle the applications consecutively, 1 through however many you do that day. You only have 1 spindle. You're going to determine and locate the correct ballot. Let's look at ballots. F-15, we mentioned this already. Federal only. Do not use those. If you see F-15 on an application like this one here, it's telling you that that voter is suspended or inactive. In other words, something's wrong with their address. What we did was we mailed them a voter ID card. The post office brought it back to us and said we cannot find them, undeliverable. And so there's something wrong that they need to fix. So they'll want to go to a grace period voting site and get that taken care of. So F15, don't just give them a ballot. You need to get them fixed. So they need to go to a special site. What you want to see is numbers like this, right above the precinct name. A ballot style 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And then you'll compare that to the application number, which is over here in the top right-hand corner of the application, and compare those numbers, and that'll tell you that make sure you're giving them the right ballot. Ballot distribution judge. You're going to initial the ballot in red ink. I already discussed that. You're going to make sure that the voter gets the right ballot. This year, the secrecy sleeves, which is big pieces of cardboard, I would use one of those as a judge on the black box paper ballot machine. I'd have it laying on the back. You'll want to use one when you're curbside voting, but I don't think I would hand those out this year. There's just something you're going to have to handle, and we've got no way of cleaning that. If somebody really wants one, you can give it to them, but otherwise, they're in your kit, but I wouldn't use those this year. Spoiled ballots. Somebody went to the booth and mismarked or marked the wrong candidate. They can bring it back and spoil it, and they'll give it to the judge and get a new one. Here's those envelopes. The one on the left-hand side is the envelope that the ballot goes in. You're going to write the ballot style on it. And then you'll put the smaller envelope in the bigger one on the right-hand side and bring that back with the precinct name on it after the election. Provisional voting. Why do we use it? It reduces confrontation, it corrects mistakes in the voter registration process, and it updates voter records. When should you use it? There are just a few items why you want to use it on. One we already mentioned. So the voter basically is wanting to vote in the polling place, but they've already received a vote by mail ballot. If that's the case, you can do a provisional ballot. A voter did not provide ID when registering. We discussed that one too. And they do not have ID to show you at the polling place, so you can do provisional. Voter's been challenged. You can do provisional also if the voter would be overruled. Provisional ballots do not go into the tabulator. They go into this envelope right here. It's a provisional secrecy envelope. It has an affidavit that's taped or glued onto the one side. You're not going to remove this piece of paper. It's going to stay with the envelope. What you are going to do is remove the yellow sheet after it's been completed. That's the voter's copy. The white and the pink stay with it. You are going to have to complete an application, and you'll use these yellow ones if you don't have one for the voter already. And you can fill it out by hand. I would tape it on the other side of the envelope, and then you're going to place the ballot inside the envelope. So you want to be careful with that. You're going to fill it out and mark it for the reason why they're voting provisionally. Track your numbers. We talked about that earlier. You want to do that every hour. I would say pick up your little notepad from your precinct kit. Someone go around, you check the number of applications, you check the number of touchscreen voters, you check the number of paper ballot voters, and anybody who's in the voting booth at the time, and those should total. If you're balanced every hour, you will be balanced at the end of the night. If you want to take those little pieces of notepad paper every hour and place them on your application pile where you're spindling, what that'll do is it'll show you where those breaks were. In case you misnumber and you need to go back, you'll know that you were good at least back to that prior check. Ballot box judge. So this is the person helping the voters at the ballot box at the touchscreen. You're watching for those initials on the top of the ballot in red. You're helping the voter with the ballot. You don't want to touch their ballot. You want them to do the inserting. The voter's going to do that. And remember to check the voting booths. This year you're going to find a lot of ink pens and black markers left in there. We're asking them to take them with them, but we programmed them to leave them in the past. So they're going to want to leave them in there, and we'll have to clean that out every once in a while. Good time to sanitize, too, if you're that person going around. Overvote and undervote. Overvote means that it's a vote for one, like president, and they voted for two candidates. The touchscreen will not allow them to do that. So if they're voting touchscreen, you don't have to worry about this. If they're voting paper ballot, they can surrender that ballot to you. They can spoil it and get a new one and go back to the booth. If they cast it, what they're going to do is if they say, I'm happy with the way it is, then you're going to hit the yes button on the paper ballot machine, and they're going to put their ballot in, and it's going to cast it without counting just that race. Everything else will count, but that race will not. Undervoting. Undervoting is where it's a vote for two, and they only vote for one, or they skip a race. Touchscreen's going to take care of that for them again. Paper ballot, they're going to come back out. There are races for county board this year that are vote for two, and there's only one candidate on the one side. So if they're only voting one party, it's going to come back out. So you're going to have to say to them, are you happy with the way that you voted? If you are, I'm going to press the yes button, and you're going to cast your ballot. If you're not, go back to the booth, and you can vote for more. Don't forget you have an emergency auxiliary bin, It's on the side, left side of the box, has to be unlocked. You'll use that if you lose power for any reason, or if the machine would fail, the paper ballot machine. And you do not want to count those until after the polls close. They're in a separate compartment in that box. But voting should never stop. Curbside voting. This is where someone pulls up outside and maybe the driver comes in and says, my mom's out in the car, she can't come in, but she'd like to vote. You can do that. You don't need to contact me. It's 2 election judges, 1 from each party. Obviously, you're going to have to take time to do that amongst the voters, and you have to go in and out. So you're going to go out, get their name and address, get their application, go back out with the application, come back in, get the ballot, it has to be paper, go back out. I would use a secrecy sleeve here, just for your safety, so you don't see their ballot. You're going to bring the ballot back in with the secrecy sleeve on top of it and cast it into the machine. That's curbside voting. It's 6:30 p.m. Election's almost over with. I would go out and just let everybody know that. Don't forget to vote as an election judge. If you're not working in your polling place, I would try to come in and vote early at the courthouse. If you are working in your polling place, don't vote after 7. Get your voting done before you close the polls down. If you forget, people have done that before, and they come up to the courthouse at night and say, I forgot to vote. So don't forget to do your voting during the day. It's 7 p.m. If there's anyone in line outside the building, a line going out the door, you want to get them on into the building, social distance the best you can, and get those voters voted. You're going to lock the door behind them, and you're going to start taking stuff down if you're done voting. You're going to get ready to turn the machines off and do your tapes. What are you doing after the polls close? There can be people still in there. Obviously you will be. A poll watcher who was in there at 7 p.m. can stay. Law enforcement if you need them. And the same group earlier, State Board of Elections, Attorney General, State's Attorney, and the election authorities. Don't forget that auxiliary emergency bin. If you had ballots in there throughout the day, you need to make sure and get those out. This is the time to run them. And so an election judge will get those out. You're going to place those in the tabulator before you shut it down to get your count on. Now, as far as voting the auxiliary bin throughout the day, if you have to use it, you have to count those manually. I'd get your notepad. I would do tally marks, 1, 2, 3, 4, slash across them, and have somebody watching everybody that's putting a ballot in there so you don't miss any. You need those for your counts. You're going to open up the ballot box, process your write-ins, make sure that your count's on. You should have equal number of applications for the paper ballot to the touch screen, should all add up. Process your write-ins. Now, if it's John Smith spelled J-O-N instead of J-O-H-N, I would take that. No stamps, no stickers, it has to be printed or written, and they do have to darken the oval next to where the line is for a write-in. The touchscreen does all that for them. They just have to type in the write-in's name with their little stylus. There's the write-in tally sheet. Hopefully you see a big O-N-O-N-E on it. You didn't have any write-in candidates voted for, and you can put none on there for me. But if you have to record them, it's a tally mark again, 1, 2, 3, 4, slash for every vote that they get, and then sign it and keep the totals. Clean up your polling place. You've got all this extra COVID supplies this year. Pull up your tape off the floor. Don't leave that stuff in there. Make sure that if you've got a big old trash can full of stuff all day long, they at least tie the bag up and put it where their trash goes. If they have a dumpster at their facility, put it in the dumpster. But clean up your area. Don't leave stuff behind. Don't leave it trashy. Don't leave food or drink spilt or anything like that. Return materials. On the outside of your transfer case where you're going to put your ballots and all the stuff that comes back to the election authority on election night, there is a label on the front that is a checkoff sheet. And if you do that, you're going to get everything you need in there. It tells you how many tapes, it tells you where the cards go, it tells you everything you need to know. Check that off and you'll have what you need when you get back up here on election night. Come back directly. It's 2 election judges, 1 from each party. You do have to ride together in a vehicle, and you come directly back to the election authority's office here at the courthouse. Remember, your election results on election night are unofficial. In other words, you don't have any of the early voters, you don't have any of the grace period, you don't have any of the provisionals that's been done throughout the day in your count, and we don't have the provisionals, and we don't have any ballots postmarked election day coming back in the mail after that for 14 days. And so even my results on election night are unofficial. Make sure that people know that. So that completes the PowerPoint training for this session.